Welcome to the Healthy Perspective Podcast with your host, chiropractor, entrepreneur, mentor, and author, Dr. Chris Bowman. He'll break down and extract the secret sauce behind his own success and the success of some of the top leaders in every category and from around the world. Get ready for your weekly mental adjustment because shift is going to happen.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Healthy Perspective Podcast. Today, we have Miss Monique Allen, who is the CEO of the Garden Continuum, founder of the Lifescape Method and the Lifescape Coach. We've been talking a little bit beforehand, and there's so much synergy here with the way that we see the land and the way that we see businesses and see people really from this holistic approach rather than just compartmentalized plants or aspects of business or even aspects of life. Just in the short time that we've been chatting, I really respect this woman for her passion, her work-life balances, the way that she approaches life. I was telling her I'm excited to talk because I have a lot of selfish questions that I want to ask, and I'm excited that you guys get to listen in on those, and hopefully this betters your life. So Monique, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Chris. I'm so excited. Like I said, when we were getting started, I love what you do. I believe so much in chiropractic care, and it's been so central in allowing me to actually keep my body going. You know, as a professional landscaper, you do a lot of body damage. So I think the alignment's just been great right at the get-go.
Alignment, I like it.
Did that.
You planted a good one there.
I did. Oh, you're good.
So how did you get started in gardening and landscaping and, that sort of a thing? As you mentioned on your website and whatnot, it's not a real typical field as far as the big contractor, landscaping thing for a woman to be holding. Maybe we typically think of a little garden or flowers or, that sort of thing. So how did you kind of step it up and go, big time, for lack of a better word?
Yeah. I started young. So I was late teens when I started, and it was really just, something to do. I had no aspiration necessarily. I had no aspiration at all. I didn't know what I wanted to do other than maybe own a Porsche someday,
There you go.
I had no idea. And I got introduced to it, and interestingly, and I've told this story before, I'm a trauma survivor, so I definitely have some real kind of pain points in my body. And what I felt was when I was outside, it was like I got plugged in, like I felt good. And so what I did was absolutely follow feeling good. So that was the whole beginning for me. I loved being outside. I loved physically working. I grew up dancing. I was really into bodybuilding when I started landscaping, and it was getting a little boring. And this was a way to now use my body in a whole other way. And so I followed what felt good, and I was meeting cool people. I was doing fun stuff, and I was getting paid. So, it was all good. And I was doing this while I was in college, and I transferred to Northeastern University and decided to study entrepreneurship. So all of a sudden, the people I was working for were self-employed. My father was self-employed. I was like, oh, okay. So then I started following that thread of self-employment, both academically, but also trial and error, like kind of trying to figure it out. And the big shift for me happened. I was in a car accident, which like literally took me out of being able to work. Wow. And this is how I was introduced to chiropractic care, because I knew nothing about it before, and acupuncture. And I got better. I got better, and I got stronger. I started to learn about how my body was working, and I didn't want to give it up. And I was laid up for a long enough period of time that I had to think about what I was going to do. And then that's when I started my first business. So that was like the first real, push me over from just kind of dabbling in it to actually building a business and taking that entrepreneurial degree and doing something with it. And then, I've been in this almost 4 decades. So the next big one for me was having children, and deciding that, wow, it's one thing to have a little business and be self-employed, but if I've got a family and I have a house and I have all this obligation, maybe I actually want to run a corporation. And so that was sort of the next big thing.
Wow.
And embedded in that was that incremental learning about doing a thing that is expected in an industry, the thing that gets commoditized, the thing that everybody else is doing, and then starting to see underneath it. And I think you can relate when you think about health. There's sort of the glossed over HMO health, and then there is true health. There's true health and vitality. And I was starting to see that in the landscape and deciding that, sure, I was going to build a corporation, but I was going to build it entirely outside the model of the corporation that I was looking at. That was an amazing shift.
That's awesome. And I love that pursuit, and I'm gonna start going big with this, as we mentioned it a little bit pre-recording, but talking about the rise of user-friendly AI. I mean, AI has been around for a long time. It's just now that the layperson can ask a question and get some answers, or whatever. But now is going to be the time where if you don't know how to ask good questions, you're going to get left behind. And that's what I feel like the two catalysts over these 60 some odd episodes that I've done with high level entrepreneurs such as yourself is they had a catalyst moment that was either near death, or they had some time where they just sat and thought for a little bit. And usually they go hand in hand. A couple of other people, like they got really sick and they're in a hospital bed, or whatever it was. It's like taking this time. I mean, sure, that coming to Jesus moment where it's like life is short and can end at any time is real powerful. But then I'm sure if you had that moment and then moved on from it real quickly, didn't have that time laying in a bed immobilized without anything to do, maybe pre-cell phone or any of those sort of things, like there probably wouldn't have been much forward progress with it. But that time of forced slowdown, unfortunately, that's what God has to do to us sometimes to actually get us to realize our potential, is to slow down and really just think and sit with our thoughts and work through things, because that becomes a skill that then we develop for, okay, so I want to have a family. Instead of just like, okay, so now I need to get a job like everybody else. This was fun. I need some security. Now you can start to think through like, oh, okay, so if I want a job, this is what, and you can think 2 or 3 steps down the line, cast a vision and start pursuing it. And I think that's where most people kind of lose it, is they think this entrepreneur is this fun mid-teens, 20s, thing that, you have your fling, but then get a real job when you want to settle down and have a family, or, whatever. Why don't you, because I'm sure this is a pillar in your coaching with people. How do you teach people to really just like sit down and gain clarity and figure out where you actually want to start, running and the direction that you want to start moving? Because usually with entrepreneurs, motivation and execution isn't a problem. It's more of motivation and execution in the right direction is what's more important.
Yeah, that's actually a really, really good question, because I think a lot of times in the coaching model, there's like, follow this blueprint, do these 7 steps, or go on this roadmap or whatever. And as a coach, I'm not real interested in that methodology. And when I wrote the book, Stop Landscaping, Start Life-Scaping, I was trying to break a paradigm. And because clearly I landscape, that's what I do.
Right.
But what I was seeing were 2 things. I was seeing featurescaping on one side, which was like, let me just keep getting things and putting things in the landscape. And then the other side, I was seeing deadscaping, which is that we're doing this varnished approach to land development, which is actually in the process killing the land and then creating a sort of a negative vitality. So I thought, well, if I'm ever going to teach this, if I'm ever going to have any impact outside of just the clients that I work with, I'm going to have to codify this. I'm going to have to figure this out. So it took me 5 years to write the book, because both my parents got sick and died in between.
Oh, no.
Which was a long journey. But I had to go backwards to figure out how I thought. And I know that codifying something, you have to make it simple. You have to make it, make a lot of sense. And so the 3 pillars were that to be successful, you needed to be organized, there needed to be health, and there needed to be wow factor. Like it was important, because as human beings, our brains are actually wired to seek beauty.
Yeah.
You know, it's part of it. So when I wrote the book, it helped me to understand what I was doing in the landscape business. But what happened, which was really cool, and this is really that thing that you said about, you know, it's like keep your eyes open and forward, is that I started to see that this was the same strategy for business. Mm. That that to simply have a motive, which is just profit, or just to be able to say, hey, I own my own business, or look at me, is it's so thin, it's so varnished, it's not going to help you. The question is, are you able to work in high integrity with your values, and are you able to actually live a rich life? And a rich life for one person could be the mansion and the Porsche, right? But a rich life for somebody else could be a really kick-ass Airstream parked on the side of a beach. I mean, I'm kind of liking that idea, right? So I feel like the first thing that I'm trying to do with people is get them to answer the question around their own personal satisfaction and their ability to tap into joy. If they're struggling, most of the time I'm meeting people with their hair on fire. And so if they're in a hair on fire moment, I mean, that's not comfortable. So what we're trying to do is get them to cycle back to be able to say with their voices, well, what is comfort for you? What is joy for you? What is precious to you? And then you get a lot of, well, I haven't done that in years, or I never get that, or I don't have that in my life. And you realize, okay, so we have a gap between the business you have that you built possibly, you know, organically and without a whole lot of real planning about you in the business. You have that thing, and it could be a great thing, because most of the time I'm talking to people who are succeeding. And then you have you that's falling off. So we need to look at you, we need to look at the business, and then we need to measure the gap, and we need to start making these roads into the middle. And that's why my coaching is so one-on-one. I'm not going to blueprint that. Your story is going to be very different, you know, than Nancy and Paul's story. Right. So I think that's the critical piece, is that they've got to look at that gap, and it's impossible to see if they don't look at the business, assess that, and look at their life and assess that. Yeah. That's very much the beginning conversation.
And so many high level, you know, coaches and mentors and masterminds and whatnot that I've been in, see, like, people ask, like, how do you get to the next zero? How do you get to the next, you know, whatever? And the good ones will tell you, do less, not more. Because so many people think I have to, you know, now work 80 hours, or now I have to work 100 hours, or now I have to do this and this and this. And what you're telling people, and what I've heard over and over and over again, and it's really reaffirming, is it's not necessarily how much more you can do. It's like, how well can you do what you're doing now? How aligned with what you're doing now is where you want to go? You know, like, slow down, reassess, because we're probably leaving a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of freedom, a lot of, you know, on the table, because of the way that you said one of the first places organized, because we just always bubble gummed and paper clipped, you know, things together in business. And that's why I feel like our head's on fire, because we wear the hats of all the receptionist, the financial person, the this, the that, the that. There is no time to cast a vision, because that's not making money right now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I need to bring money in right now. But what you're saying is actually all that stuff is hurting your long-term success. And so better to do it now, sacrifice the, you know, $5,000 you would make that week and take a vacation, and that way plan for the future, because that's going to benefit you. And it's so interesting. So I'm a homesteader too. We didn't really talk about that too much. We have a couple acres that we just moved in here at the end of January. Before, we were homesteading on a different property. And what's so interesting, my growth as a homesteader, I've taken classes to learn about, like, soil, you know, biodynamics, and, you know, like, all of that stuff. And so many people just, like, think you have a plant or a seed, you can put it in dirt and water, like, all the things. What does a plant need to grow? Dirt and air, or dirt and sun and water. And it's like, well, I mean, for a minimum viable product, maybe, but there's like trillions of things going on within the soil that the plant is using the sun, you know, like, all of those things for. And it's just like, just going back to, it's this holistic view of you, of the business, not just this, like, how do I make a fruit tree grow? Just dig a hole and put it in the ground. You know what I mean? So how are the parallels between, like, when someone wants a landscape, you know, how do you kind of talk them through, this is going to bring life, and then how does that parallel to, well, I want a business that gives me, you know, life? Well, what are the parallels between the two?
The main parallel is that it's a long game.
Mm.
I mean, that's a main parallel, is that when we think about anything as, you know, silver bullet, a pill, turnkey, you know, kind of, you know, what's that one thing you have to do? It's just not how it works. When we think about how a human being evolves, we know that, you know, that evolution is a lifetime. And, you know, what I know almost 40 years into a career is entirely different than when I started. I'm a completely different, I mean, biologically, all my cells I'm completely different. And so I think the first parallel is that it's a long game and you need to be willing to play it.
Good.
You need to be willing to play it. And if you're looking to rush, go fast, if you're looking to show me your wallet and how fat it is and how much I'm actually not interested. Right. Because it's kind of like, you know, it's like the bodybuilding adage of, you know, being all muscle and no strength. You know, you can get all puffed up, but there is no real strength. There is no core strength there. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for, you know, we're looking for diversity, so biodiversity. We're looking for resilience, the ability to be resilient. We're looking for, I mean, all you got to do is look at COVID and what happened there to so many bodies, that, you know, if you're staying kind of on the top level and you're not really healthy, you know, something small or big can take you down. Yeah. This is the same in the land. This is the same in a business. So it's looking at those core elements. And one of the core elements that I think is critical is that investment in time, knowing that, you know, it's going to be cumulative, and everything that you do right now is foundational to the next thing you do and the next thing you do. So if I'm building a patio, I'm not just slapping, you know, pavers on top of loam. I have to get the loam out of there. I have to make a firm base, especially here in Massachusetts when I get frost 4 feet down. So I think the biggest parallel is whenever you look at something like nature and all the diversity that's in nature and all the potential that's in there, you never approach it with hubris. You never say, oh, I know, you know, I took a class, I know. Well, you took a class, you know something. Right. And you can go, and business is the same way. You're going to go there knowing something, because as soon as you start building teams, as soon as you start assembling people around you, which is the way you scale, you don't just scale, you know, so you're just doing a product. You understand that that correlation between the dynamics of an environment where you have all this biological life interacting with each other. Well, you got that in the office too, all around the water cooler. So those parallels, to me, I didn't set out to build a coaching business. I was building my business using an enormous ability for resilience. I learned that as a child. A little bit of relentlessness. That's kind of my nature. I'm driven. And I'm such a huge believer in the power of regeneration. You know, the fact that we can be sick, the land can be damaged, we can be broken, you know, and we can heal. That biology and nature is geared toward healing. Yeah. And so if we work with that genius with reverence and grace, and we keep approaching it with a beginner's mind, open-mindedness and all of that, we can grow anything. A business, a family, a garden. And that's the thing that for me really has been the central part of coaching, is that I'm seeing the individual in front of me and trying to follow the essence of their lead. Like, what is the essence nature trying to express in that human who has a business, has a family, I don't know if that answers the question, but
yeah, 100%. Yeah, we have animals. The main thing that we have, well, we have a bunch of different animals, but the animals that have been with us the longest, our beginner to homesteading was pigs.
Mhm.
And I always say when people are like, "Hey, how do I get into pigs? I want to start breeding." I'm like, just remember this: pigs will teach you patience, because when they're 350 pounds, you cannot tell them to go anywhere. They will do or go wherever they want. You have to learn their nature. Once you learn their nature, then you can take them wherever you want to, as long as you're doing you're making it their idea to go where you want them to go. And I have two stories, one with the bull and one with our pig, where both instances they were like this far away from where I was trying to get them to go to where I could close the gate. And I was like, you know what, instead of like putting the food in there, I'm just going to wrestle this 350-pound pig into the thing. That'll work really well. And so I put my arms around, and like, I mean, my arm, I was probably, I can't show it on camera, but I mean, my arms like this, like it was like I was grabbing a tree, and I'm like, I'm just gonna guide this thing in there. No way! Like, she freaked out. I got drugged like 20 feet, and she's off in the corner of the property. I'm all skinned up and whatnot. I have a great story to tell. And the same thing with the bull. Like, we brought him right to our property. He was a mini bull, so we thought we could handle him and whatnot. And he got spooked because he's outside the corral. He hadn't done that, and we had two leads on him. My friend I don't know if he let go or it slipped out of his hand, so I was left with it, and I got drugged halfway down the driveway. It's like, it's we got it's fine. No one got hurt except me. But learning these animals' nature is what allows us as homesteaders to be successful, and learning the nature of these plants. You can't put. I mean, you can put an olive tree out in the middle of the field and get sun all day without much water, and it's going to do great. But you take a mango tree or a banana tree or something like that, and you're going to see real quick that you're working against this plant's nature, And I love what you said, where it's like you got to recognize that when you bring a team, they're not all you. You have diversity within the team, because if it's all you, if you have a flawed process, a disease, the whole team is going down because everyone's susceptible to the same thing. So you have diversity, but you can't force this bacteria or that bacteria to go to this spot to produce this thing. So that thing, it's just cultivating what motivates this person, what motivates this KPI, what, you know what I mean? It's this ebb and flow, not control, but the stewardship and cultivation of interaction. And when that is mastered, as you've mastered landscaping and continuing to master coaching and cultivating of businesses and whatnot, it's like at the end of the day, that there really is no blueprint that's going to help somebody be successful, because it's always evolution and change. How do you help and encourage entrepreneurs that are used to what's the best way, maybe the most extreme way to describe it is the more totalitarian type? You have your CEO, you're kind of scared of the CEO, and you do whatever they say, and there's this like kind of like whipping leader rather than a servant leader. How do you kind of coach this transition? What are the key things that will help somebody see this way of really leadership and stewardship, rather than just maybe the typical, I don't know, the thing that we had in our mind when you said I wasn't going to be a typical corporation, right? I was going to
Yeah.
steward. How do you kind of steer people away from that, or coach them out of that if they inherited something like that?
Well, it's a good question, and this sort of speaks to brand and marketing. I'm a firm believer in education-based marketing and the inbound strategy.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm a writer, I'm a blogger. So I'm putting an enormous amount of information out into the world, at a very low cost or for free, because I do believe that, the information that we put out in the world, the message that we feel is coming through us, you put out that into the world and it will attract your tribe, right? It's going to attract who you want. So in the landscape world, I have done so much work. I mean, I started writing in the 90s, and, back when I had to go to a printer, and then fold the paper and lick the stamp and put the wafer and put it in the mail. Like, it was just so So I've been writing for long enough that that I have a bit of a following. People
Yeah.
sort of know my thought process. So people are self-selecting into my sphere on the landscape side. And now that's starting to happen in the coaching side. So I was coaching as a side hustle
Yeah.
for, 7 years before I decided, gosh, I should actually make this a real thing. And now I work about 3 days a week for my coaching, but my landscape business, my flagship business. And now I'm teaching yoga. And so I'm very steeped into to teaching and learning that. And then I coach. So all three things make, you said, what is the whole of you? What is the person of you? Those three things make up my brand. And it's not varnished, it's not a logo, this is who Monique is, this is how Monique approaches life. And I can show the successes, and someone is either going to see that and say, oh, wait a second, I got all this CEO nonsense in my head, all this top down thinking, and I'm looking at her and she looks happy, like, wait, I want that. And so I don't usually have to talk people out of it, because they've self-selected by saying, I say right at the beginning, build a high integrity business and live a rich life. If that's something you want and you see me doing it, you might listen to what I have to say.
For sure.
Now, I will tell you that sometimes what I say is a turnoff, right? Like, I tell people, so before we get started, let's take 5 minutes and breathe. Let's work on breath. And
I don't have time for that.
I don't have time for that. I want to do coaching. I've had people where we're working on the coaching and they're like, okay, wait a second. So what am I getting when I'm done? Like, what am I getting when I'm done? And it's like, well, it isn't a thing. It's not what you're getting when you're done. How are you going to feel? How will you navigate after that? And one of the analogies that I really like is, if you want to be a captain of a ship, nobody's going to blueprint the ocean for you. It's not going to work. You have to be able, you're learning navigation skills. And the very first area of navigation is the inner environment. And if you're coming to me with your hair on fire, and you hate your employees because they don't do what you tell you, and you hate your clients because they don't pay you on time, and you're just outwardly pointing and hating, then what you're doing is you're actually trying to bend the outside environment to suit you.
Interesting.
Well, if I bent the outside environment to suit me, right, you'd have to live in it and you'd be uncomfortable. So what if I work my inner environment so that you can be exactly who you are, and I will take it or leave it. I will learn how to navigate it. If I need to be in interaction with you, I will become a master navigator.
Yeah.
And so while I will get the pushback sometimes initially, I'll try to get them to stick with me for a moment. Stick with me for a moment. You already paid. Let's just stick with it. And if you don't like it, go away. It's fine.
Right.
But I will say every time, I haven't had, knock on wood, so I haven't had a time yet where somebody said, I hate you and I'm leaving. Maybe that'll happen. But every time people have this wide-eyed moment and they're like, crap, it's so me. I gotta deal with that thing. I gotta deal with that thing, right? My neck hurts, my neck hurts, my neck hurts. Well, maybe you need to think about
how you're sleeping,
how you're sleeping, the strength of your shoulders, the way you're sitting. Like, you have to work on the inner environment. And I think that's really the thing that ultimately attracts people to my landscape work, to my yoga work, and to the coaching work, because they're all
pushing pigs.
They're all pushed, right? Right. And the pig doesn't even know it.
No. Yeah. That's so good. And that's super encouraging, because I think, especially for all these young people, that they're looking at the Mark Cubans and the Gary V's and the Tony Robbins, and it's like, I have to be like that to be successful. And it's like, you won't be, even if you are a clone, picture perfect, you won't be, because you're not being your authentic self. The only reason they're successful is because they are. Like, you look at everyone, not everyone, but in the NBA, Michael Jordan is this, the most famous basketball player, perhaps athlete ever. and reading, his like, biographies and watching the documentaries made about him, it's like they all come back to the most unique thing about Michael Jordan was he was Michael Jordan. He wasn't trying to be Wilt Chamberlain, or he was being him, even though it was different than other things. He expected different things. It's like he was successful because he was him. And Steph Curry now, same thing. Like, he doesn't dunk. Like, that's kind of okay, but he can make a three like nobody else. And now all the kids want to make threes all the time. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you become successful by being your authentic self, because there's only one of you. You have a specific purpose cut out for you. Just like when you plant a plant, it's like, this plant is here because it brings life to the things that I want, or that I need, or that need to come here. Only this plant has this specific function, whether it's, nitrogen fixing, or attracting this animal or insect, or, whatever it is. And seeing that you do have a purpose, I think the way that you empower people with that is super, important, because that's where you have to start. If you don't feel like your life has a purpose, you can have all the clarity, all the things that you want, you know what I mean? It's not going to take you anywhere, because the second you face some adversity, you're going to give it up.
You'll crash. And I think that it goes back to like two things that come to mind right away is, sort of that, be still and know. Like, you don't know in action, and we actually need action and we need stillness. Like, we need both. We were built to, be awake and sleep.
Yep.
Like, the whole biological process is that we do both.
Yep.
And so much of what's being pumped into our ears, and maybe our ears are a little less susceptible than the younger ears, but it's like, do, go,
Yep.
Make more, add the other zero. I mean, one of my biggest aspirations was I wanted to make $1 million, right? I wanted my company to make $1 million. I made $1 million and I literally didn't know what to do with myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, now what do I do? I don't know what to do. I literally don't know what to do.
Life goal accomplished.
Yeah. Like, I guess I can be dead now. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like, it was so deflating. And that's when I learned about triple bottom line.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So triple bottom line was so important to me because the planet was really, really important. People are super important. And if there's no planet, there's no place for people.
Yeah.
If there's no people, what do you do with profit? Like, buy stuff? Like, I don't. So this push, and in my industry, oh my gosh, like the push for profit, and the hype about like Profit First, which is a great book. I mean, I love it. It's fabulous, but it can't actually be first. It can't actually be front and center, because we do all this work for profit and then we become bankrupt. And so, and I think that, the other piece of that I wanted to just mention was, this piece about family. My trauma made it so that I never wanted to be married. I never wanted to have children. And I fell in love and got married, and then, oh my gosh, I wanted a child, right? And so then I brought children in, and then I realized that, wow, what a responsibility. They're not mine. Going back to what you said about cultivation, not control, right? Stewardship. This is what we're doing for every human that comes through us in the family aspect. This is what we do as an owner with every individual that comes through our company to work for us, for whatever that moment is. So it's like, people are in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And you've got to determine, and you can't vilify people for going away. You see parents vilifying their children for wanting to go away. So I think this be still and know, this whole idea of like finding that still moment so that you can say, oh, wow, I have this thought or this vision, and I am clear, and it has meaning, and it's purposeful. So, okay, yes, I'll be a homesteader and get dragged around by the pig, dragged around by the bull, but I won't quit.
No.
I'll just know that that's not how to do it.
Yeah.
So I feel like it all comes back to, no matter what you're doing, no matter what your age is that really understand that you are cultivating your life experience by constantly going back inside and reflecting.
Good.
Right? Keep reflecting, always be reflecting, so that you can be cultivating the inner environment, which ultimately makes you a better person to be around. And then you can navigate anybody and anything.
Right. And what a better place to do that than in a beautifully landscaped garden.
Of course. That's a great place to be still.
Right? Even though there's nothing in a garden that is still. You know, you
Nothing.
got bugs, you got this. And isn't that such an interesting thing? But it's such a level of vibration, I think, that like it harmonizes with us. So it feels still, even though it's like, you know, there's this buzzing alive, you know, type of thing. I love that paradox, kind of like we are still when there's life around us, rather than, you know, in a tin can or, you know, like something like that. It's like our energies can harmonize with what's going on around us.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And for me, that's so my real love in yoga is I teach a class called Master Class, which is it's like half yoga, asana, the movement, and then half nidra, the sleep. And it's so cool because when you really get good at yoga nidra, then what's happening is you're balancing on the edge of wakefulness and sleep. And that is that place of ultimate sort of essence, nature, vibration. So you're just tapped in, but your body, the actual form is completely still. But that vibration that you were talking about it's entirely active. And that is the place where like the ideas drop in, where peace, where joy, where all of that, you know, kind of satisfaction really drops in. Yeah, I love that. That's like my favorite class.
Yeah, I love it. I'd like the second part of it. I'd be hard to do the first part.
The first actually gets you able to be still. So that's kind of an interesting thing. If you've got a hard day on your you know, on the homestead and you're doing like you sleep like great, right? It's like food is better, sleep is better because you worked your body. So
that's true.
We're built for that.
That's true. I took a yoga for disease class when I was in chiropractic school, and we had to like demonstrate certain like this for that, you know, like that sort of thing. And then I don't remember what, but there's one that you're just laying on your back. I'm like, this is just called sleeping to me. But all of us were just like, we're gonna demonstrate this one for 20 minutes, like just take a break. Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah. The corpse
that was
pose.
my favorite. That was awesome.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Monique, thank you so much for taking your time, sharing your wisdom so freely, being so open. If people want to learn more about you, if they want to read your book, where can they go?
They can go to the Lifescapecoach.com. You can get my book there. You can, you know, order it on all the big places too, but you can get it and I'll autograph it for you.
Wow.
So you can go there and find out all about what I do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This was an amazing podcast. I can't wait for people to hear it. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Healthy Perspective Podcast. To connect with Dr. Bowman, follow him on Instagram @Dr. Chris Bowman. Until next time, make shift happen.